What's your favorite John Travolta film? The pitch for this one? What if James Bond teamed up with just the worst American? It's day 91 of 365, today's movie, From Paris with Love. Directed by Pierre Morel, who we just talked about on the Taken episode just a couple months back, and starring Jonathan Rhys Meyers and John Travolta as spies. If I'm being honest, I actually only saw this in theaters until the rewatch for this. It wasn't super memorable, although the twist did stick with me. I did remember the betrayal that happens at the end of the film, as well as John Travolta just kind of being a jerk across the movie. I couldn't remember exactly why, though, and on my recent rewatch, I saw why I may have forgotten about this one. Travolta's character goes on racist tirades and just has a general contempt for social decorum. He's basically playing Mac from It's Always Sunny, but as Mac sees himself in his head. Jonathan Rhys Meyers is also kind of flat in comparison, and so I couldn't help but thinking maybe this movie could have been conceptualized as like a satirical spy comedy. It may have made more sense with him playing a straight man to John Travolta's crazy, wacky American. I guess they can't all be winners, so let's talk about the three things that I liked about From Paris with Love. The first thing that I love so much about this movie is the America versus Europe dynamic. I love that they're setting up this very romantic, Parisian, James Bond kind of feeling across the whole entire beginning of the film, only for the whole thing to get absolutely split in half with the arrival of John Travolta's character. He's rude, he's crude, he's arguing with the TSA. He is exactly what Americans seemed like at the time, especially in a post 9/11 world where airport security was extra tight. He was acting exactly the way entitled Americans often do. I see compilations on TikTok all the time of people acting like this now in 2025. Playing into this character, I see the humor in it now. I see what they were going for. He's kind of detestable on purpose. And so I can't honestly fault them for writing a character like that. The movie's not saying that he's right for being this way. And honestly, it ends up being Jonathan Rhys Meyers' character that comes out on top, that is able to figure things out with the more surgical way instead of using a bludgeoning baseball bat metaphorically. But this also ends up being a reason I think this would have played better as a comedy. If this movie took itself less seriously, then we could have played into these things a little more. Imagine Melissa McCarthy's Spy mixed with Pink Panther. It could have been absolutely riotous and not changed a single character. I don't need to recast at all. I think just the tone shift would have been enough. But because this is a European director, the guy that did Taken, he's going to do the most serious version of this possible, and I don't fault him for that. Comedy may not be his forte, but even a comedy version of Taken ends up making more sense than the serious version of Taken. So do with that what you will. The second thing that I like about this movie are the action sequences. I gotta say, if you're gonna have the guy from Taken here, you're at least gonna have a good time with the action, and I can't complain about any specific sequence very much. This was an era where quick cutting was kind of the thing. The Bourne movies had shown us that you can really add impact to an action sequence by cutting quickly around the action. And I think that this movie is one of those that does it well, along with Taken and a few others from this era. It's just a style. I know it got overused and oversaturated and it made people really hate it, but it does still really work at times. Not to say that a long cut take doesn't work as well. I actually just saw Thunderbolts recently, and it has an extended oneer for an action sequence around Sentry at the end of the movie that really fucking works. I do love a wide single take action sequence, but chopping it up sometimes adds to the frenetic nature, and I think that this movie in particular, one that's trying to make two spies look almost superhuman without going too over the top, while still being kind of over the top. They're walking a tightrope here, and I think that works very well. There's specifically one sequence in the middle of the movie where they're yelling and screaming at each other because they're not getting along, and that one in particular I really enjoyed. I think that scenes like that can show character while doing action, and that's a difficult thing to pull off. Jackie Chan was definitely known for doing this across the 90s, and as that kind of fell off and things became more about just the stunt itself and less about storytelling, it's cool to see that there are still action sequences happening where storytelling is happening within the action. The third thing that I like about this movie is the finale. The over-the-topness of the rocket launcher sequence is exactly what I think this movie was asking for. And another reason why I think it would have played better as a comedy. If I'm being honest, the rocket launcher is so comedic it almost turns into satire at this point. And I don't blame them for writing it that way either. Even doing the serious version ends up being a little badass, if you ask me. Taking a cell phone call in the middle of trying to aim a rocket launcher, that's crazy. That's crazy work, but I still really ended up enjoying that sequence. It's got perfect payoff, a slow motion, heat-seeking rocket that we watch run up the freeway to save the cavalcade. I think the whole thing really works. And honestly, it just plays up the over-the-topness of American cinema. There's no James Bond movie that's going to end like that except for ones made by Americans. And so I think that watching this all go down is just too funny to say no to. Contrasting that with the finale of the whole thing, where we get to show off the brains versus the brawn, the movie kind of ends up saying neither one of these is too correct or too incorrect. They're both needed at different times, and both of these guys being here is the reason that everyone gets saved ultimately. So if this is the love letter to all spy movies, European and American alike, I can accept it for that. And while I didn't give this one especially a good review on Letterboxd, you have to go over there to check out what I gave it. I think that ultimately it works as a concept, it just could have worked better. But what do you think? Are you a fan of From Paris with Love? Or like me, do you think this would have worked better as a comedy? Our next film launches us into a trilogy of cop movies. I don't know how that happened. It just ends up being this way. We're talking about Edge of Darkness next, and I'll see you tomorrow.